welcome to episode 11 of C is for Columbia. Once again, we've taken a bit of a break, but back into the full swing of things with whatever's on our docket. And to kick us off, Sam, what do you got?
Yeah, so we've got a great show today. First thing I wanted to bring up, there was a poll conducted that nearly 8 in 10 voters support Bernie Sanders' bill to raise the minimum teacher pay to $60K a year. This includes nearly half of respondents, or 45%, who said that they strongly support the idea. The proposal is even popular across the political spectrum. It is supported by 88% of Democrats, 77% of independents, and 67% of Republicans. Teaching in America, yes, many people feel that teachers deserve to be paid more, and even that teachers should be more qualified. I know in Arizona, they recently announced that you don't even need a bachelor's degree to be a teacher anymore. So are the standards for teaching not high enough? Would we have higher standards maybe if we increase teacher salaries? I think the issue is there's a lot of people who would like to be teachers, but just feel that they could make more money going through different avenues and different career paths. And, without that incentive of pay, it's just hard to kind of recruit a decent amount of quality teachers, especially teachers that have a master's degree. I mean, I think this is an important point. Bernie Sanders has always kind of championed these kind of issues. I don't know what this would look like on a broader political scale, how we would potentially pass legislation on a national level to increase teachers' pay. But, I mean, it seems that a lot of people, including, more than 2/3 of Republicans, support this measure. Ted, what do you think about teachers in America?
My sister's a teacher, and I worked at a school for a number of years, and I've said for a while that teaching is a calling. And by that, I mean you better be passionate about it because it doesn't pay very well. So if you don't like it, you're going to have a bad time because you're not going to be making bank in it. So as far as raising their base pay overall federally, I'd be all for that. I'm kind of curious, how many states would that bump up base teachers' pay in public schools? How many states are already above a $60K minimum? Not many?
I mean, what I would just kind of imagine is that this would probably have the biggest impact in the Midwest and the South. We're both from Indiana, and I don't think any of our teachers were getting paid that much, especially the ones without master's degrees. My sister's educator as well. She works for a Montessori school, and she makes not barely what I would even consider to be a living wage, although I don't know that this would affect private schools, though. This would be a public school issue. But going back to the original point, it's just there's not really an incentive for a lot of people to become teachers, and it's harder to keep good teachers because, if you're a good teacher and you're really taking it seriously and you're passionate, but you can't pay your bills, I mean, it kills any incentive for quality education. It does remind me of something Chris Christie said a long time ago. It was in a town hall, I think, back in the early 2010s. So he was still governor at that point, and he said, if you don't feel like you make enough money being a teacher, don't be a teacher. So that's basically where the Republican Party has been on that issue for quite some time. I know there's even some people, I think Betsy DeVos wanted to abolish the Department of Education. So it's just there hasn't been a lot of, at least in government, there hasn't really been a lot of bipartisan support for increasing teacher pay and, bettering their conditions. At the same time, though, this poll is showing that Republicans and independents support it almost as much as Democrats. So I guess it really just comes down to, what's the disconnect between what the voters want and what's actually being supported in Congress and the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that public teachers are in the public sphere so deeply in America now, which when the country came about, that was not the case. There was no public schools and there was no public funding towards education like that. It was all done privately, and it was all done almost agriculturally. as far as it now being so politicized in the form of moralistic antis. So sometimes pushing against agendas that would be pushed through public schools. Various agendas. I mean, the trans one is one of them, or anti-religious stuff is sometimes in there. And usually it comes across, at least, as anti-education in terms of pulling focus away from learning meaningful things in school, in public school at least, meaningful to their core values sorts of things, and more about reading, writing, arithmetic. I mean, I think Trump has used that phrase within the last few months. Bring it back to reading, writing, and arithmetic, whatever that might mean. And really what he means there, I guess, is employable skills sorts of things. And if Republicans see schools as not teaching employable skills, they may not see value in it, and that's why they don't want to put money towards it. If they sort of see it as a cash in, cash out sort of thing, what value is there to it? But I'm just spitballing there. As far as raising the minimum salary, I think that could only really do positive things. The likelihood of that passing is probably pretty low. I don't know if that's due to special interests. That might just be due to there not being enough momentum to get the bill through in general. I don't know what kind of spending increase that would require, but of course, I'm sure Bernie Sanders is always very avid that he's figured out a way to pay for whatever spending he's talking about through some other program, or moving funding for something else that is seen as lower value. So overall, I think broadly speaking, when you say raise teachers' pay, I think most people agree with that. It becomes more politicized when things start. You break down what those teachers are teaching within the schools. I think that's when it starts to become politicized, and that's when some more conservative parents might want to say, pull money out of the schools. They're not teaching my kid anything useful. Perhaps that does come back to a lot of the Republican, more conservative values people see. They don't want to see their kids being indoctrinated, quote unquote, or coming home from school with ideas in their heads, whatever that might mean to them. So I guess that's my thought on that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that could be like a whole nother like segment just on, because there is obviously, regardless if everybody thinks teachers deserve to be paid more, there's also the issue of, what are we teaching to our kids, and do we agree with what we're teaching to our kids? And that's obviously become like a pretty contentious issue with critical race theory and gender theory.
And it's easy to politicize. It's easy to get people up in arms about it. So if it's easy to politicize, it's a very hair trigger sort of issue.
One thing, I pulled up this article just today because it actually caught my eye. Biden administration pushes to revitalize coal communities with clean energy projects. The Biden administration is channeling hundreds of millions of dollars from recent legislation into its efforts to turn coal communities into clean energy hubs. According to the White House on Tuesday, the administration gave an update on its push across agencies to kickstart projects nationwide with funding Congress approved during Biden's first 2 years in office. The effort includes a $450 million bipartisan infrastructure law that the Department of Energy will allocate to an array of new clean energy demonstration projects on former mine lands. So I brought this up because that coal is an issue that's going to come up in this election. I think the same way it's come up in the last two elections. Hillary Clinton kind of infamously said, we're going to put coal miners out of business with all of her political charisma that we all know she has. It didn't really work out for her in the long run there, especially in Appalachia. But, in a serious sense, though, we do need to kind of have some sort of a game plan here, because, coal mining is not sustainable, and I don't think, in my opinion, we can really rely so heavily on coal if we're going to address, climate issues. on a grander, more serious, sphere of influence, I would say. And, I do think that, yes, if we are going to replace coal mining jobs, like, we need to make sure there are, like, other alternatives in terms of not just what energy we use, but also the people who are eventually going to lose their jobs due to a lot of these coal mines being shut down. I do think that the Biden administration is playing this smart. They have a comprehensive bill and agenda with allocated funds to essentially what they're doing based on this article is they're, bringing clean energy hubs to these coal mining towns. And I think this would be a more constructive way of kind of handling this issue, a little compassion in terms of like, if we're going to get rid of something, we do need to actually replace it with something meaningful in terms of how that's going to affect the economy. And then also, I mean, having these clean energy hubs would be great. I think this issue really is an old money versus new money type of issue is how I would kind of characterize it. Because, you have the old money with the coal industry that obviously has made its mark in American history and has its hold in the American economy. So I think we are going to need to also not just have renewable energy alternatives, but we also need to, incentivize these alternatives, in an economic level. So I think this is one of the smarter things Biden has done. I just wonder if the voters in Appalachia are going to go for it.
Well, I don't know about the voters in Appalachia. And also, I'm not so sure that, because that sounds pretty localized. I'm not sure that he would care too much about his polling regarding that specific initiative that he's putting forward. Probably the bigger pull would be whether he can get corporate interested in the green energy initiatives as potential. So whether he can pitch it as an influence expanding opportunity for some of these existing industries to put money towards an incentivized program towards green energy. Because otherwise, these industries can look at all these incentives and say, okay, that's bait. Like, I'm not taking that bait. You're just baiting me. These incentives aren't going to last forever. And if I put money into this, it's cutting down on my bottom line. They're not stupid, right? And that's if Biden cares whether or not to, perhaps he wants to take a very progressive view and offer these incentives, and then when they're not taken, start blaming the industries for not taking them. But that would be something, I wouldn't see Biden doing something like that, trying to pitch like a progressive green. That would be something like the Green Party would advocate for. I don't really see Biden doing that.
Well, the Green Party or, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Green New Deal movement.
The progressive wing. Let's say progressive wing. Yeah. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party. I wouldn't count Biden as a part of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, but he has made some concessions towards that. And perhaps this is it's a concession he can make. It's a pretty localized concession, it sounds like, the way you described it anyway. So I don't see it as too costly. It might be costly for that community. Who knows if it backfires? It could be very costly for that community. I saw in my town there was a solar farm that was being pitched to be installed in my part of town, and there was some protesting regarding that. I'm not sure where that protesting originated from. Some of the reasons given were honestly a little bit suspicious to me. They were talking about the hum of the inverter, that it would be loud and a noise pollution problem, and I really don't buy that. And also the land, diminishing land value, which I could sort of see the argument there that it would diminish some land value. I'm not sure where that protest originated from. And I'm not sure if that protest originated from the existing energy companies that are against it. Recently in Indiana, there used to be an incentive where if you installed solar power, you could sell back to the grid at a relatively premium rate. And they have actually knocked that rate pretty well down. You can't sell back at the same rate. So the time it takes for you to make up the initial investment cost of building a solar farm is now much longer. and that might de-incentivize or disincentivize uh, individuals or firms from building solar. Um, yeah. As far as his federal reach, Biden's federal reach, I can't tell if that's a meaningful change that he's trying to make as an initiative, or if that's a little bit more virtue signally towards green energy and towards the progressive wing. I can't tell.
Sure. One thing I will add to that in the article, it's not going to be purely Appalachia, I don't think. It says it's going to target 25 communities. It doesn't list
So it's
each.
a little
So
more
here's what I would
expansive.
say. It doesn't list every single community, but it says like from Wyoming to West Virginia. Now, Wyoming and West Virginia
Okay.
are not states the Democrats can probably win in unless you're Joe Manchin.
Yeah, and I don't think they're targeting those specific communities for votes. That doesn't make much sense.
No, I mean, that's fair. I don't think it's purely a vote. I do think, though, like the Biden administration does have some agenda, even if it's not as progressive as the Green New Deal. I think he does on some level, though, care about, the issue of climate change and has some incentive probably to.
Can you tell me? Oh, I'm sure that, yeah, I'm not saying he doesn't care. Can you tell me if these initiatives are built on federal land?
That's a good question.
In
Let me go back
Wyoming?
to the article. So I do see something about giving money to the University of North Dakota and West Virginia University for research. I'm not seeing anything. Yeah,
So
they
it's
do
grants.
that.
That's
I'm
grant
not
money.
seeing.
They always do that. Yeah. Big whoop.
I'm not seeing anything specifically that it's federal land.
Okay. Well, I was curious if it was federal land because that would be really easy for him to do. And it'd be very easy to then say, okay, look, I've got these communities all over America, 25 of them that I've invested solar into. And all you've really done there is you built some solar farms. Like, that's not going to do anything. But you can point to it and say, I'm trying to promote green energy from the position of the administrator, from the position of the executive office, signaling that the Democratic Party is working towards green energy initiatives. Really, that's just a signal, though. And that's how I feel about so much of the green energy stuff, honestly, is that so much of it is just signaling and it doesn't do anything. Like, there's no broad-reaching stuff towards green energy that I see. It is very niche-y, and it signals the advent of being opposed to climate change and working against climate change, but I haven't seen much of the green energy initiatives do anything but kind of sell nice feelings. To be honest, that's my personal view, and this feels no different.
Moving on to the next thing. Joe Biden, speaking of Biden, Dark Brandon, as they call him.
No one calls him that, though. Who calls him that?
I don't know. I heard somebody did once, then I thought maybe.
I've heard people say that they call him that, but I've never heard anyone actually call him that.
No.
But anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
The point I was going to make is that Biden has given TikTok the ultimatum: sever ties with China or be banned. And
Yes.
obviously, this was something that got brought up on the federal level. They interviewed, I believe, the CEO of TikTok, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And brought him upon, various panels and questioning from Congress. So, when I was a kid, TikTok was a song by Kesha.
Wow, you're old.
I don't really use social media. Yeah, I know. We're old boomers. We remember Kesha when she was relevant. I still like Kesha, but I am not very social media savvy. I don't really use social media. I don't really feel like social media benefits me in any way. I guess besides YouTube. But going back to the point though, TikTok has become a very pivotal issue right now. It's that there seems to be some issues and concerns regarding tracking and data collection and, a potential foreign influence. And then, of course, all the other things that have always been said about social media that, like, it's bad for your mental health. But I don't think that's the main issue why this ultimatum was brought up. Facebook's bad for your mental health, but we're
Right.
not
Yeah, that's
banning
social media. Yeah.
Facebook. That's
Right.
yeah, and mental health in this country could be a whole nother conversation, and social
Sure.
media would be a part of that conversation. But yeah, so I mean, what comes of this? I mean, what would happen if TikTok got banned? I guess would be my first question, and then how much of this is virtue signaling and politics, and how much of this might actually have substantial political implications in terms of potentially, I mean, Biden did give an ultimatum that TikTok could be banned based on what Biden's saying if they don't sever ties with China. So, I guess there's a lot of ways we could kind of jump into it. We kind of mentioned the social media mental health aspect, but we also kind of mentioned the connections to China, and then maybe if there's geopolitical implications of this as well. And then just also the other issues of, tracking and data sharing and things of that nature. I'm not really sure how this is going to materialize, and I don't know if I understand social media well enough to completely grasp the situation. But Biden does seem fairly serious about this.
Well, I'm sure that he does seem fairly serious about it. He's probably getting a lot of pressure about it. I think that the TikTok debate, or the TikTok scandal, whatever you want to call it, is very, very similar to the stupid balloon thing. You remember the balloon thing? We covered it.
We were the first ones, I think. Probably not.
Probably not, but
we did cover it.
We did cover it the day that it was shot down. And it feels a lot like that in that the balloon itself was not consequential, probably. The balloon itself represented something in the American psyche. It represented a growing fear that China is going to have more and more influence on the world stage as time goes on. And TikTok is kind of similar. TikTok is akin to China's way of influencing the world's media economy. And I think that a lot of people look at that and they look at TikTok. And if TikTok were truly American owned, I don't think, like you said, so much social media is bad for your mental health. I don't think there would be nearly the same amount of pressure surrounding the addictiveness of TikTok and the ability for TikTok to spread whatever information that the algorithm decides to spread. I don't think that would be nearly as politicized as it is, simply because TikTok is foreign owned and it's owned by a Chinese firm. Biden is pushing for that firm to cut ties with the American side of TikTok. Obviously, that firm is probably not, ByteDance is not going to do that. ByteDance cannot just cut all interests with the American side of TikTok and say, bye-bye, American economy. I'll just cut you off and we got to listen to President Biden. Nah, they're probably not going to do that. So I think that's an ultimatum that really will not be met with anything. But I also don't think it'll be met with any consequence. I honestly think it'll fizzle out and TikTok will still be around. And people might still hate it, but nothing's going to happen with it. That's just a noisy, it's just noise in that sense. But I do think it still represents, similar to the balloon. The balloon was also noise. I mean, it didn't spark World War III or anything like that. But that noise does represent that there's a growing fear that China's going to have more and more an influence within the world, within all these sectors. And honestly, like, for as much money as TikTok makes, that must be less than 0.1% compared to the trade that China goes through on the world economy, the total trade. I mean, it's got to be peanuts compared to the steel, the amount of cold rolled steel, let's say, that just as an example, that China sells on the world economy to the U.S. So economically, country for country, it's a blip. It's not very much, but what it is that's very visible. A lot of people use TikTok, obviously, so it's a good springboard to start talking about China, and that's where I think we'll probably be going in the next decade. I don't exactly know how that's gonna look, but we're probably gonna be talking more and more about China's growing, China's really catching us, and catching up to the West in general. and what does that relationship look like going forward? That's probably the discussion that TikTok is foreshadowing.
Well, I don't know if TikTok will be around forever, but I think this podcast will. Pretty good show today.
Oh, wow.
Hey, one other thing I want to say,
gutsy.
Easter's coming up. So for those of you who practice Easter, happy Easter. At the very least, get
Happy
some...
Easter.
What do they eat on Easter? Like jelly beans and stuff? I don't know.
Oh, we're having lamb. No, we're having lamb.
Really?
I live in a... Yeah,
Wait,
I live in a Christian household, and we'll be celebrating Easter.
That's so funny, because I'm actually cooking lamb for my family. I'm going up to northern Arizona in the Sedona area. Yeah, I'm cooking lamb for my family this Easter, so that's actually funny, I guess.
Very nice.
All right, so we're having lamb. How about that?
We're both having lamb, and I hope everyone out there listening has a great Easter as well. And enjoy whatever meal you prepare. And if you don't celebrate, well, that's okay too. Enjoy your Sunday. And everyone out there, stay safe. Stay safe from TikTok. Stay safe from the American school system. Just stay safe.